We are now nearing the final decade of the 20th century. The great African in America, the sociologist, historian W.E.B. Du Bois, identified the problem of this century as the problem of the color line in a book called Souls of the Black Folk, 1903. Thus, it is fortunate that in the final decade of the 20th century, a basis for the solution to the problem of the color line has been produced. This basis rests in an adequate analysis of the nature of the color line, the exact nature of local and global racism. Ultimately, the conscious decision by people of color worldwide, the overwhelming majority of the world's population, to base their behavior in relationships on an exact analysis and definition of racism as white supremacy will change its appearance and activity on planet Earth. Just as the problem of the color line, racism, has controlled events in the 20th century and prior centuries, the solution to the problem will regulate events in the 21st century and beyond as we enter the era of justice. Recently, there has been an unraveling and an analysis of the core issue of the first global power system of mass oppression, the power system of racism, white supremacy. Once the collective victim understands this fundamental issue, the ultimate organizing of all of the appropriate behaviors necessary to neutralize the great injustice of the white supremacy power system will be only a matter of time. Once the collective victim understands this fundamental issue, the ultimate organizing of all of the appropriate behaviors necessary to neutralize the great injustice of the white supremacy power system will only be a matter of time. The length of time required to neutralize global white supremacy will be inversely proportionate to, number one, the level of understanding of the phenomenon, plus, number two, the evolution of self and group respect, the will, determination, and discipline to practice the appropriate counter-racist behaviors on the part of non-white victims of white supremacy. Thus, the 21st century, and indeed the end of the 20th century, will be a time perhaps of great devastation. But undoubtedly, it will be a time of great change. And the most critical factor in that change of circumstances will be the non-white people's ever increasing understanding of the behavioral phenomenon of white supremacy as a global terroristic power system. However, it must be understood that high levels of self-respect, will, and determination without an adequate understanding, analysis, and definition of racism as the oppressing power system will not be sufficient to bring the long-sought global sought goal of neutralizing that injustice and establishing justice and peace for all people. Therefore, it is critical to have a comprehensive analysis and definition of the opposing force. As a Rastaman trying to be a behavioral scientist and practicing general and child psychiatrist, because we have a youth, so the parents are the first psychiatrists because they have to observe the behavior of their children. My current functional definition of racism, white supremacy, as follows from the definition of Dr. Cress Welsing, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Yeah. It is as follows. The functional definition as researched and defined by Dr. Cress Welsing, Francis Cress Welsing. The functional definition of racism, parenthesis, white supremacy, is as follows. The local and the global power system structured and maintained by persons who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously determined. This system consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response. As conducted simultaneously in all areas of people activity, parenthesis, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. The ultimate purpose of the system is to prevent white genetic annihilation on Earth, a planet in which the overwhelming majority of the people are classified as non-white, black, brown, red, and yellow by white-skinned people. All of the non-white people are genetically dominant in terms of skin coloration compared to the genetically recessive white-skinned people. When this definition of racism as a strategy for white genetic survival is mastered, one can understand precisely not only the present global power formation and realignments, that is, USA and USSR, now known as Russia, linkage and European unification, but also all present urban non-white center epidemics. I am speaking of the current urban crisis of drug use, drug addiction, drug-related murder, teenage pregnancy, infant mortality, black academic underachievement, black teenage unemployment, black adult male unemployment, black male incarceration, single parent female headed households, chronic welfare dependency, poverty, AIDS, and homelessness. These very disturbing individual and group destructive pathological forms of behavior are the direct and indirect byproducts of a behavioral power system fundamentally structured for white genetic survival locally and globally. White supremacy, domination, and oppression of all non-white people is essential for global white genetic survival. The prevention of white genetic annihilation is pursued through all means, including chemical and biological warfare. Today, the white genetic survival imperative instead is using chemicals in gas chamber, is using chemicals on the streets. Crack, crank, cocaine, ecstasy, PCP, heroin, and methadone. All designer chemicals. Ultimately, these chemicals are produced by whites and made available to urban black, particularly black males, upon whom the future of black people is dependent. The core dynamic of white genetic survival eventually leads white to a major act of genocide, destruction of the genes of non-white people, or toward genocidal imperatives. Such a genocide occurred in Nazi Germany in 1933 to 1945, wherein the Semite and Gypsy population were classified as non-white and therefore were destroyed. The reason that the black male, as recently symbolized by Willie Orton, is and always has been central to the issue of white supremacy, is clarified by the definition of racism as white genetic survival. In the collective white psyche, black males represent the greatest threat to white genetic survival, because only males of any color can impose sexual intercourse, and black males have the greatest genetic potential of all non-white males to cause white genetic annihilation. Thus, black males must be attacked and destroyed in a power system designed to assure white genetic survival. In the white supremacy mindset, consciously or subconsciously, black males must be destroyed in significant numbers, just as they were in earlier days when there were widespread open lynching and castration of black males, or during the Tuskegee syphilis study from 1932 to 1972, when a large number of black males were used and destroyed by whites. Today, we are witnessing a more subtle, systematic approach to white genetic survival. The destruction of black males is indirect, so that the black male victims themselves can be led to participate in and then be blamed for their own mass deaths. However, through close examination and an understanding of the ultimate objective of white supremacy as collective white genetic survival, the steps to massive black male death can be charted. The chain of events begins with the denial of full-scale employment and advancement to black males so that they cannot adequately support themselves, their wives, their children. In turn, large number of black male children grow up without their father's guidance. This leads to frustration, depression, and failure in school. Once this atmosphere is established, drugs are placed deliberately in the black community. The drugs are then used to street treat black male frustration and depression. The high prices for which drugs are sold provide the black male population with the illusion that finally they are beginning to make some money and to share in the American dream. Guns are then placed at the disposal of the same black male persons, supposedly to aid them in enforcing payment for drug sales. More important, the strategy is for the black males to kill and destroy one another and then carry the blame. It must be realized that no black males manufacture the chemicals for drug use, nor do any black males manufacture guns. The same power system of racism has so ingrained a negative image and connotation of blackness in general, that is, for example, Black Monday, black male, black sheep, black day, and of the black male in particular, that for black males to slaughter one another in the streets daily means next to nothing. Indeed, it is treated as desirable and acceptable. Good riddance of bad rubbish. This is in stark contrast to the urgency, alarm, and concern that is generated in the same society when only 25 young white males commit suicide in the course of a 24-month period. Failing to comprehend the environmental context of the white supremacy system and its ultimate goal of white genetic survival, black people also fail to grasp the deeper sense of what actually is occurring in front of our eyes. We do not realize that the massive deaths of black males constitute the genocide of black people, as it takes black males to make black babies and to ensure future black generations. The destruction of black males for the purpose of white genetic survival is the reason behind the ever-increasing disparity between the number of black females entering and graduating from high schools and institutions of higher education compared to the far lesser number of black males. This becomes an additional fact of black genocide. Furthermore, with genetic survival, when white genetic survival is the dynamic behind high incarceration rate of black males in the United States of America, which is second only to that of South Africa, the country of former apartheid, the government of white supremacy. The high rate of black male incarceration contributes in genocidal fashion to the prevention of black birth and the black male supported development of all black children, particularly boys. The genocide of non-whites must be understood as a necessary tactic of a people, white, that is a minority of the world's population, and that because it lacks the genetic capacity to produce significant levels of melanin, is genetically recessive in terms of skin coloration, compared to black, brown, red, and yellow world majority. Thus, the global white minority must act genocidally against people of color for the purpose of white genetic survival. This is the kill or be killed mentality. This is the reason that persons who classify themselves as white behave genocidally towards Semites in the Holocaust in Nazi Germany and Europe, 1933 to 1945. The word Semite is from the Latin prefix semi, meaning half, half black and half white. And that means mulatto, non-white. This is also the reason that persons who classify themselves as white behave and still behave genocidally towards the indigenous inhabitants of the Western Hemisphere who were classified as red, non-white. That is meaning the American Indian. Only the willingness of non-white peoples worldwide to recognize, analyze, understand, and discuss openly the genocidal dynamic will bring this injustice to an end. Most important, black males must help one another to understand that they are being led by the dynamic of white supremacy to inflict extreme damage upon themselves, one another, and ultimately the black race. Black males must understand that, contrary to what is said, the war being conducted in urban centers is not against drugs, but against black males. for the purpose of white genetic survival. Drugs are used simply as the means to achieve that end. This is why drugs are plentiful, while black males are dying in ever increasing numbers. The recent proposal to treat drug addicts at military bases is only the first stage towards a more formal concentration camp placement, more formal than the ghetto. Mastering the above definition of racism as a strategy for neutralizing white supremacy will permit one to decode accurately the symbolism in the new Madonna video like a prayer, designed consciously and or subconsciously by whites to massage, stimulate, and enhance further the collective instinct for white genetic survival. The same could be said about recent films Betrayal and Mississippi Burning. Furthermore, such an understanding will help clarify the persistent and even violent behaviors on the part of persons associated with the so-called Right to Life movement, which seeks to prevent abortions, especially amongst whites. Recognizing racism as the struggle for white genetic survival helps one to understand what is happening in South Africa, what is euphemistically referred to as apartheid, is only the tactics and strategy of the minority white population numbering only 4 million persons attempting to survive genetically while surrounded by a majority black population of 26 to 30 million. This is a microcosm of what is happening in the entire planet. Finally, the time has come for unveiling the true nature of white supremacy, racism. For this reason, I am continuing the work entitled by Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, The Isis Papers, The Keys to the Colors. Isis was the most important goddess of ancient Africa, specifically Egypt. She was the sister and wife of the most important Egyptian god Osiris, Lord of the Perfect Black, and the mother of Horus. On the astral interpretation of the Egyptian gods, Isis was equated with the dog star Sirius, Sothis, according to the ancient African story. After the murder and dismemberment of Osiris by his evil brother Seth, Isis discovered the crime, recovered the pieces of the body of Osiris, and put them together again, restoring his existence and his power. According to the legend, Isis admired truth, justice, and made justice stronger than gold and silver. In the present era, truth and justice has been crushed by the global power system of white supremacy, making the existence of peace on the planet impossible under this reign of terror. The attempt in this work to reveal some aspects of the in-depth truth about the white supremacy power system for the ultimate purpose of establishing justice and peace in the world is the tradition of the great African goddess Isis. I hope that with this knowledge, the world's non-white people, black, brown, red, and yellow, will work more effectively to neutralize this global and most monstrous form of injustice and chaos. Any person not interested in a definition, analysis, and deeper understanding of worldwide white supremacy must have an interest, conscious or subconscious, in maintaining the same. The subtitle of this work, The Keys to the Colors, as subtitled by Dr. Cresswell-Singh, MD. The subtitle of this work, The Keys to the Colors, came from a statement made to Francis Cresswell-Singh by a patient in Washington, D.C., public mental health clinic in the late 1960s. The patient was a tall, thin, middle-aged, black-skinned man who, in a somewhat confused manner, talked earnestly to me about the problems he had experienced in his life. He said, speaking to Dr. Francis Cresswell-Singh, MD, he said, "Doctor, if we could just find the keys to the colors." And he repeated it slowly, "Doctor, if we could just find the keys to the colors." It was a statement I never have been able to forget. This work, the work by Dr. Francis Cresswell-Singh, MD, is a portion of the response to finding the keys to the colors. Preface. Dr. Francis Cresswell-Singh, MD, Washington, D.C., 1989.